Good evening, good evening. Welcome all. Welcome, welcome. And we decided to do a little mini show, not the usual stuff with the intro and all that, but just want to talk about a few things that, pretty much weigh heavy on our minds and a little bit of what we've been challenged with on Twitter and it seems the talk in the webs, right?
Right.
So, let's see what we get.
Trying to see if I can
Find the live on here. So there we are.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
There we are.
So, as you're doing well. Hello, Elliot. Welcome.
So glad to be here with you guys on this Sunday evening.
Yes,
I'm sure you guys could be doing other things, but thanks for dropping by. And for those that are going to watch in the future, thanks also for watching, and all of our lovers and haters. Thank you for contributing to the conversation.
Yes, exactly. So the topic today is pretty interesting. Anatomy does not determine gender, and there's this black or white mentality, specifically surrounding the gender critical, rad femmes, the religious, and people that just want to crucify people just for being different.
Yeah, and when you usually go with being an absolutist about anything, you end up being proven wrong eventually. And the way to deal with an issue that you're struggling with or that you have a problem with is not to try to eradicate things. I mean, you literally solve nothing by doing that.
No, and this whole argument, I mean, it's like us against them mentality. There's this angst, this anger, this I can't even find the right word when we come across these individuals that at all cost want to ram their belief down our throats. Yet they're saying that we're ramming our belief, not us in general, but the trans community,
right,
down their throat, all because we just want to live. Just like they were fighting for equality and for their rights for a very long time. That's how we in the trans community feel that we're doing. We have to literally fight for our lives.
And for a person like you who transitioned such a long time ago, that that you fought for the very rights that some younger trans people now easily get. I mean, the other a couple months ago when we went to do our driver's license, it was much different than the original time when you went.
Oh, of course.
Years ago, right?
Like back in 2003, it was unheard of. They looked at you, they laughed. They're like, you can't change your gender marker on your license. They knew about legal name change because you go in and they have to follow that. But when it came to legally changing your gender, even though I had the affidavit of, sexual reassignment surgery and all this stuff, they didn't hear about it. It was just like they wouldn't have it. So they had to call Tallahassee, and you hear the giggles and the laughs. And it's like, people don't have to go through that anymore this day and age.
And here we are in this modern time, right, where so many rights have been granted to people like us in the LGBTQ. And, here we are at this moment in history, and the trans community can't seem to get anything together to work together as a cohesive unit and agree on anything. It's like we fight about the concept that trans women are women, trans men are men. Some people say, it's okay to say trans men are trans men, and trans women say that trans women can't be women, they have to be trans women that are men. Right. And it's like this whole like confusion. I mean, and what does it solve? Really?
And what do the people looking in think about all this disagreement? If we can't even get it together as a community, what are people supposed to think? I mean, it's just like, listen, transition is a process. You go through whatever process it is to make yourself feel comfortable. Once you're done with that process, you no longer harp on the fact that you are biologically this or biologically that. And when you look at biology, everything plays in the role of gender misalignment. Your brain is your number one gender organ. It tells you. I mean, that's hardwired from 8 weeks gestation, give or take. It's not the development of your genitals and gonads aren't the same as the development of your brain. There is a process that takes place. So we believe, and so do other professionals, that transsexualism is a form of intersexuality. Intersex people don't like that. A lot of people don't like that. But we aim today to read some articles that will help you understand that it is.
And to understand that using absolutist, all or nothing talk really solves nothing. The fact of the matter is that, as we're going to show in future shows, there are parts of the body that doctors have never even recognized before until just a few years ago as even existing. And these are body parts and organs that literally were right under their noses for decades and millennia. So when we say that we know biology, that we know how the body works, when we barely discovered DNA in 1956, I think it's a bit presumptuous.
I think they're using that just as a tool to justify their hatred and their unwillingness to accept us as the people that we are. And that's, that's cool. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But when they try to take away the rights and as much advancement as we have made, that's when we have a problem.
And when trans
Becky
people
joins us. Hey, Becky.
And when trans people literally do the work of people who are trying to discredit your very existence,
yep,
we have problems in this community.
We do, because if we can't get it together, then how do we expect the rest of the world to see us? And for all of you trans people that are on the same bandwagon as the religious extremists or as the rat femmes and all that, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. You're really hurting yourself and hurting the actual community, because you're providing tools for those that dislike us, that want to eradicate us. You're making it easier for them. Kid yourself not.
And quite honestly, I think that many of those that do use that argument, and try to go on the whole biology, bandwagon as being the clear delineator, and that we have to separate ourselves and have trans only spaces. I mean, there are rad femmes that say, I would support trans people having their own trans spaces. I mean, that sounds like I would support, Black people to have their own water fountain to drink from.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same thing?
Same thing.
I mean, it's the same thing in my mind.
Yeah. And it's like that's elitist, separatist mentality that it's like, it's okay, but just stay in your closet and don't mess with our people. Don't mess with our women or children. You're not allowed in any space. You just stay away from us and you do you in your little corner.
Yeah. Stay away from our sports. Stay away from our daily life. And, if you can blend into society, please just do and stay out of our hair.
Yeah,
basically.
Pretty much.
But, the thing is that many of these trans people that do have this idea of like, well, dang, I can't get along in life without being clocked all the time. I can't get along in life without being read as a male or read as a female because, I just can't. Then, this must not be real for anybody else because they can't, I can't, so you can't, and we all can't. Right. So let's just call ourselves.
So they have to harp on their biology and make it a big deal. We didn't do this to be some sort of unicorn or some sort of hybrid or to be trans this and trans anything. We did this to transition. When you transition, that's the end of that. You're there. You've arrived. When you arrive, you don't want to harp on that. Okay? No one is saying that biology isn't real. There's a lot of biological essence to any type of DSD, which is dysfunctional sex development. But you don't live there. And to continue to provide that tool to those that want to eradicate you is dangerous. So let's see. Elliot said, I just changed my passport to a male one. It was really easy. I needed a supporting letter from a therapist, and that was it. And that's awesome. And what I had a fight back in the day.
You had to threaten with a lawsuit, right?
Yeah, because they didn't want to change it originally until finally they did. But it's like, a lot has been gained through the years, but a lot will be lost if people continue to do what they're doing and thinking, I don't know what they think they're really doing.
I really don't. I mean, there's legislation out there to really hinder the progress that we've made as a community, or a segmented community anyway, that we've been able to get. And if people just sit around and they just agree with all these rad femmes and Christian extremists and say, you're right, let's just have trans spaces for trans people. Yeah. You're right. We shouldn't compete because we're so we're not right. We can't compete with the right gender because, you're right. We should it's like, what? Yeah. What are we supposed to do? Just lay down and run us over?
If they had their way, they'd take us all to an island and we would live there excluded from everybody else, and that would make them happy. In the meantime, people are just handing them the tools for our demise.
Becky says, we are not just biology. Each of us really doesn't know anything of who we are, including myself, but I'm okay with that.
Exactly. We're all just learning as we go along. We're like winging it and trying to lead the best life that we possibly can. And most people don't realize that these meat suits aren't that important, but there's something very spiritual. There's a divine masculine and divine feminine. And I truly believe that we are here to learn how to balance the two. Anyway, Elliot says, yeah, it's like when people say, I don't care if someone is gay, just don't be affectionate with each other in public. You're still infringing upon their rights, and you obviously do care. Exactly, because they're made feel uncomfortable, so they don't want any part of it. We have, anyone that's gay or trans have to live their life in the shadows, hidden in some sort of closet, so that people feel better. And that's wrong, because we are just entitled to live life and be as affectionate and lead the normal life that everybody else leads.
I mean, back when I wasn't transitioned back then, but early 2000s and stuff, the Baptists had this massive campaign against Disney because Disney was allowing Pride Days at Disney World. Oh my God, if children were to see two women holding hands or two men holding hands, and God forbid they kiss, oh my goodness, PDA. It's like, this has been going on for far too long. And the extreme right, Sharia law making crazies out there are wanting to destroy the gay and lesbian, transsexual, bisexual community, queer community, intersex community. You're not excluded either. No.
They want to be a special snowflake. And that's another article we're going to be reading today. It's regarding the fact that transsexuality is a form of intersexuality. And, it was written by a university. It's a university paper that brings up a lot of great points, and it's just food for thought. We don't have all the answers. Everything that we see today is not just like an end of the book and that's it, it's over. There's a lot that we are still learning in the science world, and people need to have a little bit more compassion and have an open mind instead of being the kind of minority who struggled, and now they're going to make the next minority struggle just as much, if not more. We need to stop that. That's rude. All right. So Elliot, let's see. I already read that. Yep. And Becky says,
what?
The last thing Becky said.
Because eventually I'll know myself, LOL. Slowly but surely.
And we all definitely do. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about this gender critical psychologist who identifies as a lesbian. And we want to show the mentality that stems from a lot of people and how they feel about the transgender community and the whole gender dysphoria bit. And then we're going to bring in our own thought on what this person wrote and says. I've been meaning to write about this for months. She says, there's no doubt that it has become dangerous for women to write or speak about their views of gender, but that wasn't what delayed this post. So it's become dangerous.
Now it's like something that's a
Threat.
threatening, like predatory danger for women to speak their mind. Again, in this Me Too generation now.
Again, bringing back that victim mentality that has been garnered for years. Now it's like, oh, we are too scared to say anything because trans people are going to hurt us, as if. And I'm not saying that there has not been, presentations or conferences where, certain individuals do get a little riled up. There's people in all walks of life that have no business going to any of these things because they get a little bit too emotional. That happens in when we have the whole, what is those
political
rallies, and you've got the how do you call those that cover their face, anarchists and all that. Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous world that we live in, but to really try to create this whole victim mentality and, oh, let's fear the trans people is wrong, because that just creates, a very hostile environment.
So what delayed this post was the sheer amount of information I would need to convey in this article to do the topic justice. And basically, we're not going to go through all of it. We're going to go through just a little piece of this. I'm going to try to cover some main points relating to my stance on gender ideology. As a psychologist, so they're qualifying themselves, an academic researcher, a lesbian, and a woman who has worked in sexual and domestic violence with women and girls for over a decade, I have many perspectives and interests in this conversation.
Meaning that they have their own thought process already written in stone. Obviously, there is what's the word?
A bias
of some
sort.
So this is not going to be pro-trans. It's going to be very anti-trans. I mean, already, we're seeing that. So before I start, I would like to take the opportunity to state that I do not support any group who mock, abuse, or humiliate trans people. I refuse to support feminists, quote unquote, who are very clearly transphobic in its real sense and use the feminism to mock trans people and gender theory. However, I am certainly gender critical in real sense.
And that is a nice thing to know, that she is not for violence and for transphobic slurs and things that, many people that we've encountered on Twitter have literally been that way towards us. We were called, trans activists, and Truscum and all that other nasty stuff that people use to label us as certain extremists.
I wanted to add that many individuals that are gender critical and are pushing an agenda to prevent trans women from competing in sports and to prevent, facilitating easier ways of transitioning, they may think that they're not pro the violence and all that stuff, but the things that they say and do does induce a lot of animosity towards the transgender community.
My main points will be: 1, the concept of gender is being wrongly discussed and defined, which has confused millions of people.
Now, the concept of gender is being wrongly discussed. How is it being wrongly discussed?
It's being wrongly discussed because, as she would define gender, millions of people are incorrect.
Exactly. So telling children and adults that they're born in the wrong body is abusive and biologically impossible. You see, that's where you're wrong. Affirming a child of what they know they are inside is not abusive. On the contrary, you're allowing the child to be able to live, play, and navigate a world that is hostile in a much less hostile world. And it is not biologically impossible because there is a lot of biology in gender identity.
Former NBA star Dwayne Wade recently had his trans daughter Zaya, who used to be Zion, come out publicly. And this is a very interesting situation because here is a African American family. Um, Gabrielle Union is a recognized person. She's the mom,
Mm-hmm.
and Dwayne Wade is the dad.
Okay.
And Zaya has an older sibling, and older sibling affirms her, and the whole family affirms their right to identify as they feel that they are inside. And this is a brave thing for them to do as an African American family. And in the face of such a time when people are so gender critical and reductionism of trans identities is at an all-time high, trans peak, as they would call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, these people are doing what they can. And it is a beautiful thing to see, because this basketball star could disown his child,
Yeah,
but
totally.
instead he's using it as a platform
To
to
educate.
allow people to understand that love is the final equation in all of it. No matter what, if you don't agree with your child identifying as the opposite sex, as the opposite gender, if you don't see it, if you don't believe it, it's not anything other than your responsibility to love them through
Exactly.
anything,
Exactly.
whatever it might be.
So, welcome, Marcy and Dylan. Thank you for joining us. So, let's see. Elliot says, children accept, oops, that just moved, accept these things really well. I've never had trouble explaining my transition to kids. I don't know why some people are so concerned about explaining these things to children. I know they get it totally, totally, and it's the older generation, it's the people that are gender crit that have the problem that they're driven by some force, whether they were sexually molested by someone in the past, or they can't accept a son, a daughter, or somebody in their family having transitioned, so they battle it. And also they're dealing with their, like, well, I don't want to be erased as an individual. This group is erasing us, and that's their mentality.
My experience as a trans woman who had a family before, it was a very difficult thing when I was told, basically, you can leave and you can just walk away silently without anybody knowing. Don't let the kids know. Don't let anything happen where you would out yourself to the children. And that is a very difficult place to be put into, position to be put into. And that should never happen. Children have a capacity of understanding that most adults have been, like, basically, like, hardwired to not understand
Exactly.
through influences of, society, and through their religious, upbringing and
Right.
everything, which we're going to talk to Marcy about this in a future podcast. But it's like, it's just like, they want to just silence you to the point where you don't exist anymore.
They don't
And I've
realize the harm.
experienced that on a personal
Yeah.
level myself. And I was told, you know, go away and don't let the kids know. Um, Walk out and get out, you know.
Well, as Marcy says, very damaging it was to her being told to stop acting like a boy, go play with girls. And I was told that too from a very young age. You don't realize how they break your spirit. So for this person that we're reading about to say that it is abusive to actually, you know, allow your child to express and be who they are. Now, what's abusive is the other, but they think, up is down and down is
And the
up.
interesting thing is that she is a lesbian.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she is going to encounter
Yeah, that's
discrimination for being a lesbian, because let's face it, it's not widely accepted for anyone to be anything other than heterosexual still in the world.
exactly. That's just totally unacceptable and very God, I don't even think of the word, but it's very incorrect for her to be saying this and doing what she's doing. So continue here, number 3.
And she said that it's biologically impossible. Like I said, We don't know all there is to know about the human body. Um, Organs being switched around, male, female, is right around the corner, people. Transhumanism is real. Um, Medical, technology is really exploding at this time, and you don't know what's around the horizon for the human. So number 3, you can't challenge the gender role binary by upholding the gender role binary. We don't challenge, as a trans couple, married, in love, happy. We don't challenge the gender role binary by upholding it. We just reflect who we are. We live accordingly. It's very effortless, actually, for me to take the role that I take and for Mark to be in the role that he's in. It's effortless. We live just as you would,
Yeah, she is actually a psychologist. So yeah, pretty sad. Number 3. Okay, number 4. Biological sex is real, important, and remains a protective characteristic in law. They have this love affair with this biological sex, and everything's biological sex. Biology makes a massive deal with everything. Feelings are biological. Gender identity is biological. So you can't just look at the gonads and the gametes and the genitals and say this is all you got, because there is more to it. It's a lot more complicated than most people care to know. And we've discussed it on the show. We've even shown the male genitalia and the genitalia look like before it actually goes into the development. It's all made up of the same thing, and there's just a difference of an amino acid, and hormonal bathing. The main, to me, the main sex organ is the brain. We don't, our genitals just work for pleasure and for reproduction, but we are more than just our genital and our gametes and our gonads. That's what people don't get.
A physical description of the human body as being simply a physical organism just takes away from the greater part of who we all are inside, and that it's not even captured in an MRI. It's not able to be photographed in a picture. It's not able to be found on a scope. It is our own sense of who we are, and it doesn't, like the wind, need to be seen. It just needs to be understood as being.
It's like a lot of the religious people that want to believe in God. They can't see it, but they claim that God is real. So they are allowed to believe in Sky Daddy. But when someone who's gender dysphoric says, hey, listen, I was wrong. I was born wrong. This doesn't feel right to me. They're challenging us because they don't see it in black and white yet, because, they haven't actually read the true new studies that come out that talk about gender identity being biological. And like I said, we're going to go all over that in a little bit.
We have a few more comments.
Okay, let's see here.
What is it? Marcy says, that's one of the subjects I want to chat with you all about. It's same as people not affirming kids who are trans. It can be very damaging to self-esteem and mentally abusive.
And she asked if this woman was a therapist, and I said yes. So Dylan says, suppressing anything in the child is abusive unless it actually becomes detrimental to their health or life. Things like identity and interests are not harmful. Which parents would realize that? I wish parents, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I don't know what it is. Is this like this control factor, this like butting heads? It's like so cruel and wrong for parents not to be understanding. I mean, for crying out loud, you brought these little beings into the world. Now you want to like torture them because they're not fulfilling your little fantasy of having a grandkid or being a certain way. It's beyond me. And so Elliot says,
Marcy, my mother is a therapist and has extremely anti-trans views. It wouldn't surprise me.
Where was that? Because I think this was right the
there.
next one.
I just read it.
Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you said
what
Marcy.
Are you reading?
Okay, that's not good. Geez, says Marcy. And yeah, that's crazy.
So number 5, gender ideology has some repressive and homophobic ideas within it.
Again, a group that has been marginalized, has been a minority, has to pick on the next group.
I know. A recently found to be a lesbian woman is now calling out these things.
So number 6, issues around gender present serious dilemmas for safeguarding.
Oh, so now we're going to be the caution police again. The trans bathroom issue, the trans kids in sports, and it's like,
and they always use this thing of this warning, warning, danger, danger. Everything's a danger, and everything's a violent of a life, and everything is like just to create this whole hostile environment. But no, they don't want to hurt anybody. Number 7, gender ideology, like any other ideology, does not have to be accepted or supported by anyone else. I mean, so when you came out as a lesbian, you didn't want anybody to support you and allow you to talk about the woman you love and allow you to live a life to make you feel as normal as everybody else. It's like,
this person is actually quite confusing when you read more about her story. The concept of gender is being wrongly discussed and defined, which has confused millions of people. The word sex has been used since the 15th century to mean the binary biological categories of mammals based on genetics and sex characteristics, yet since the 15th century, but genes were never discovered.
Yeah.
How is that?
So the WHO 2020 defines gender as gender refers to the roles, behaviors, activities, attributes, and opportunities that any society considers appropriate for girls and boys and women and men. Gender interacts with, but is different from the binary categories of biological sex. But what is more important? Behavior, activities, attributes, everything that we do in life revolves around our gender. We don't walk around showing our genitals and saying, hey, I'm going to be carrying a child or whatever else. That is reproductive. That's a reproductive system. Gender, in my humble opinion, is a heck of a lot more important than everything else. And if you're living your life and you are in distress because your sex does not align with your gender, we've got a problem. And that problem needs to be resolved because it would be cruel not to allow people to resolve it.
And you and I were talking about it. If a blind person were to encounter you or me, I mean, and they have nothing to go on other than their innate sense of your being, by your sense of just who you are.
By the essence, by that's why we call masculine and feminine energy. It's very clear. You may not be able to put it under a microscope. You may not be able to say, but it's there. It's very evident. So
my view is that there is no such thing as quote unquote gender. I don't believe gender is innate or biologically predisposed. I don't believe it exists at all. As a radical feminist, I believe that the only way for children to be free from gender roles and gender is to eliminate it completely. Smash the patriarchy, they say.
And that's what they want. That's why they so much just completely go on sex and not people's gender identity. The word gender has Latin and French origin. It means type or kind. The term gender role was first used in 1955 to mean all those things that a person says or does to disclose himself or herself as having the status of boy or man, girl or woman. So this person here obviously does not like men, doesn't like the stereotypes. And although we had a show a couple of days ago regarding how important stereotypes are, you can't run away from them. And the reason they are stereotypes is because they've been true and true. So
Marcy says, I don't understand gay and lesbians being so anti-trans. We went through homophobia a lot in the past, but now to avoid focus on them, they attack trans people to feel they fit in more now. I don't get it.
I don't either. It's every minority does it. When they've reached the top of the ladder, Individuals that are trying to climb the ladder, they will kick you down. And that's really sad and uncalled for. Elliot says, do they not realize trans people can also be gay and lesbian? It's not like one or the other. Exactly. Exactly. But again, motives, radical feminist, gender must have had some sort of bad experience somewhere down the line where they are taking on this particular stance.
Marcy says, and as homosexuals, we most definitely have or had struggles with gender confusion and or social roles. We are not very different at all. In fact, we share a lot of the same struggles.
Exactly. But I don't understand why this person who continues to say in the 1960s and 1970s, second wave feminists such as Betty Friedan wrote about women's gender roles being used to keep them in the kitchen and as slaves to men at home. I don't, this whole mentality that if you are to do something nice for your husband because you want to, you know, that you are a slave. In my house, my father was the one who cooked because my mom couldn't fry an egg for the life of her, right? If a woman enjoys cooking and enjoys doing that for her husband, what is so wrong with that? I don't understand this whole like get it yourself or I'm not your slave type mentality. When two people love each other, they want to do nice things for each other. Forget the roles or forget whatever. It's like this whole mentality that has been lost due to this whole empowerment, equality, blah, 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 blah movement. It has devoid human beings of kindness, in my humble opinion.
You know, I mean, the stereotypes that they go back to are in the 50s sitcoms like Ozzie and Harriet and, you know, June and what is it? The Cleavers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ward and June Cleaver.
Okay.
June was thrilled to take care of the home. She was excited to make Ward his favorite meatloaf, or you know, it brought her joy, tremendous satisfaction. There are some women out there that imbue those types of characteristics, and those are beautiful things, nurturing things. Those are wonderful things. There's nothing wrong with a wife wanting to take care of her man. I mean, I don't understand why just that innate desire that some girls have to stay at home, to take care of children, to be able to make sure that the house is in order and to organize everything, that's such a bad thing. There are some women who do like that. Others don't, but that's okay.
And some guys enjoy cooking. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy cleaning. I enjoy doing certain things. It's an individual thing, but to sit there and continue to harp on people because we're not your slave or whatever. It's a movement that has been created, as we spoke about in the same show regarding the whole start of feminism and where the whole mentality, which has ruined, in my humble opinion, the balance of the world. So let's see here.
Her book, The Feminine Mystique, Betty Friedan, about the feminine gender role stereotypes, was an extremely influential book for women who felt oppressed in the gender role expected of them. And I wanted to add, we did some research and found out that the great feminist person who started Ms. Magazine and worked with Esquire and others, the famous Gloria Steinem, she was a CIA operative. She worked for the federal government to subvert and to try to change perspectives, social perspectives, and feminism in general has this tinge of having been orchestrated. But people think we're quacks, yet Gloria Steinem admitted that she had been a CIA operative.
Well, that's, it's like they're trying to create this hive mind, unsettled people, dividing they shall conquer. There is a reason behind why feminism was created, and people don't want to understand that, how many years have people lived, women have enjoyed, doing certain things. Men have enjoyed doing certain things. It's in the animal kingdom. It's part of what life is. All of a sudden, somebody starts to say, "Hey, you don't need to do that anymore," and they start like putting stuff inside people's heads, and things started to change. So during the 1970 academic journal started to use learned sex roles, quote unquote, interchangeably with innate gender roles. However, by the 80s, the academic consensus was that sex was innate, but gender roles were learned. And we spoke about that on the last show that we did, and they are innate. They're not, some may be learned, but there's a lot of stuff that's innate. It's reflexive, as many behavior in animals are. From then onwards, gender or gender roles have been known to be socially constructed norms based on notion of masculinity and femininity. And that's incorrect.
A baby naturally knows when to take from the mother's breast. It doesn't have to be taught that.
Mm-hmm.
It's innate. It's not a gender role. It's not constructed. It's an innate sense of knowing that the mother has what the baby needs.
Exactly.
The concept of gender, quote unquote, because she doesn't believe in gender at all. She says she doesn't believe it even exists.
Right.
As we know it, now actually comes from the phrase / concept gender role stereotypes, quote unquote, which was first written about and criticized in the 60s by, guess who? Second wave feminists.
Gender role stereotypes were originally defined as a set of behaviors and characteristics that were socially constructed to relate to the role of men and women. Women were described with and defined by a set of these rules, quote unquote, and so were men. So, like, rebellious, it's like, sheesh. If you look at the animal kingdom, and it's very evident, anything in nature has a purpose and a role. You step out of that, bad things start to happen. I'm saying, look at our world today. It's pretty unbalanced.
Women were feminine. Nothing wrong with femininity. Nothing wrong with it. Some women are feminine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
Quiet. Oh, yeah. Some are quiet too.
Yeah.
Pretty. Yes. Submissive. There always has to be a yin and a yang. You can't have I don't know. I don't like thinking that I would be, an aggressive person, with us.
Right.
I know my role. You know your role.
Mm-hmm.
We love our roles, and we like how we live. So there's always going to be a dominant one and a submissive one. Content, polite. And what is wrong with not having someone spew the F-bomb? This happens on Twitter. There are some very filthy-mouthed women these days that just have this sense of domination of conversation, and they just throw the F word around like it was nothing. I mean, mothers of 3, who feel I'm sure they would never use that terminology or that description to anybody in their household, but on Twitter, they just turn on a fire.
I don't know. Some of these people do, and that's why their kids follow suit, which is pretty sad. So,
domesticated, and there's nothing wrong with domesticated. I mean, nothing. Kind, natural caregivers with no need for a career, and some are. Some love that. Education or an opinion or ambition.
If you think about it, a lot of women that have gone to find a career and no longer domesticated and all that stuff, it's they gave up, being able to be the one that takes care of a home and the husband brings home what the wife needs. She's able to take care of those children so the kids don't grow up by the state and a system that's corrupting their child's mind. It's they think they got something really good out of the deal. And, not saying that women shouldn't have careers and they shouldn't be educated, but somehow, some way, I don't know. I mean, to me, I find that.
I think, some women, it's a balance.
Yeah.
They know that in their life, the balance that they want to strike is worth staying home, is worth not having a career, is worth what they want out of life.
Spending time with their baby. I mean, I remember when I was working, there was therapists that had maternity leave. After 3 months, they had to come back to work, and they hated it. They wish they could spend more time with their kid. You know, it's like they had to now give their kids to some daycare, and it's like they yearn to be home and see their kids take the first steps and do whatever it is that mothers enjoy doing. This person makes it out to be like it's such an awful thing to be a woman, and to be a woman that, you know, enjoys being home and taking care of her husband and kids. It's like, I don't understand the whole concept of this new movement, you know? So they wore dresses and skirts. They wore makeup, had long hair, wore high heels, and existed to be looked at and adored by men. What's wrong with that?
You know, I mean, what is wrong with that?
A woman taking care of herself and wanting to look good.
Being attractive is a bad thing.
You know, but again, yeah. So the gender role stereotype prescribed that women were heterosexual and wanted to be wives and mothers.
Many did.
And many did. But see, the radical feminists that are maybe fighting that don't see that, and they find that it doesn't fit them. And it's okay. It doesn't have to. Not everyone's made to be the same. You know, everyone is entitled, but to put down women that want to do that, to put down transgender females that want to do that, and to tell people that are comfortable in gender roles, are comfortable with gender, that it is wrong to be, that's where the problem lies.
You know, and Darcy joins us.
Hey, Darcy.
Hey, Darcy. Dylan says, feminism ideology was created to liberate women and to promote equality with men. It's not like that today. Today, women are dead set on hating and dominating, like the men have been for decades.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you tell them that they are being as toxic as the men have been to them, and that they are becoming the same toxic masculinity that they abhor, they take it as like, oh, so I'm just supposed to stay in the kitchen and clean, and I'm just supposed to be quiet, and well, I'm not going to be your doormat. And it's like
you know, rebellious child, a rebellious child. You know, somebody that's been living under very strict conditions, and all of a sudden they just want to rebel. And they don't realize it. Who they're hurting is not other people. They're hurting themselves and don't even see it. And Marcy says, you guys are so right with the divide and conquer mentality happening these days. I see it more and more every day with all the groups, all races, especially on social media. It's horrible, Marcy. It is so horrible. I mean, people can't agree on anything. It's toxic. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of hatred. It's just...
It's creating this climate of dissension, you know, and sooner or later, it's gonna really get to a boiling point.
It is. You know, I don't know what's going to happen.
If there's any civil unrest, I mean, how are we going to work together?
We can't. We won't. And I think that's the whole concept, that they're trying to divide us even more. So when something does happen, they want us to kill each other out, literally, because that's what's going to happen. You know, people can't be civil in good conditions. Imagine when things get tough. And not if, but when, because everything is just going upside down.
So Darcy says, feminism likes to shame femininity. It's awful. I hate feminine women, and it hates feminine women and masculine men.
Yeah, because they just want to, like, they're the rebellion people. And they want to rebel against everything. And so if you're a woman and you want to be feminine, they put you down. If you're a dude and you want to be masculine, they put you down. And then every guy is awful and evil and out to get you. You know,
they have names like MRAs and TRAs. And,
and, you know, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy. Let's see here. Marcy says, when I was living with my ex, she had 2 kids and absolutely loved staying home with the kids, cooking, cleaning, doing all those things. My lesbian friends would make fun of me all the time for it, you know.
And that's so wrong.
And that's what I did too when I was living as a lesbian, and I was the feminine one in the relationship. I loved it. God, cleaning the house, cooking. It's like, look what I made now. You know, it's like, it's a beautiful thing. There is absolutely nothing wrong. And people that stay home have just as important job as those that go out to work. As a matter of fact, the work at home is never done, especially if you have children. But they don't value that. They don't value the fact that their job is so important to keep everything running smoothly in the house. I don't know what the whole anti being domesticated is all about. I really don't.
So men were masculine, strong, loud, dominant, aggressive, stoic, firm, goal oriented with job roles. And these are all stereotypes of men, and many men are very masculine or were, in the past.
Yeah.
Strong. I look at my dad, I can see that was a very, very prominent feature. Loud, yes. Dominant, yes, very dominant. Aggressive, stoic, yeah, they were taught not to show emotion. Firm, goal oriented with job role responsibilities, education's opinions, the right to vote, and the opportunities to progress.
Well, people don't understand that all these things that are in men and all these things that are in women were there for a particular reason, for survival. You know, nature has a way of putting things inside specific sexes because it needs to be that way. It's not, it's not something that people just make up. It's part of your biology. And these individuals, even though they're so about biology, they're really not. They're really anti the normal reflexes and normal programming that we come from all the way inside our DNA. They don't want to believe that, though.
Dylan says, Marcy, people don't realize that being a stay at home parent is a challenge in itself. Listening to my own mom go on about what a little monster I was when I was a little toddler, one can argue that it's a special sort of career.
It is very hard. And most women will not want to do it. And that's why the whole women's lib became very appealing to them. You mean I don't have to stay home with the kids and cook and TV dinners, and then came up with all these ways of making life a lot easier for the housewife who no longer was a housewife. Now they push you out to work. They could tax more. Now they don't only not tax your husband, now they're going to tax the wife as well. Let's take their kids, indoctrinate them in this special place called school.
And typically when two parents work, they take more taxes. So you're actually bringing home less pay.
Yep. So crazy stuff. So let's see here. And Marcy says, thanks, Darcy. Me too. It's hard to discuss a lot in the chat. It will be nice to be able to have a conversation, not limited in chat.
Yeah, we are so looking forward to it, Marcy. There is so much that we just want you to share your heart and give us, how you felt, and let us know, and the viewers know just how dangerous it is to be raised with such an abusive religious type background.
Exactly.
So Darcy says, Dylan, my mom said I was a sweetheart as a child. LOL. I guess I wasn't that bad as a baby.
And he also says, Marcy, I was abused too, but that's not why I transitioned. If I ever talk about it in public, the right will shame me and say the reasons why I transitioned to a guy is to escape womanhood and take control. And, they want to create all sorts of scenarios and paint things the way that they are. There's a lot of people who suffer abuse and they don't transition. I think there's a very large majority of people that are actually have been sexually abused and emotionally abused and all sorts of different things. They don't make them trans. They don't. A lot of regular heterosexual people have had all sorts of abuse. It didn't make them gay or trans. So that's a very, very watered down argument that makes no sense whatsoever.
And Marcy says, yes, Dylan, exactly. It was hard work and exhausting. And Sandy McCrae joins us.
And Bill, Sandy, I wish I could stay home with the kids, but as single mother, I can't. A lot of women wish they could do that. And here you have the feminist, gender crit people that are just like pushing that opportunity out the window for everyone.
They wore trousers and suits.
Yep.
Grew facial hair.
Yeah, and never wore makeup and existed to make money and protect their family. The gender role stereotype prescribed that men were heterosexual and wanted lots of sex with lots of women before eventually finding a wife and becoming a father to children. Usually sons were desired to continue their higher line. But they really have this warped sense, this like, I'd hate to really have that kind of brain, and live with that kind of angst.
These are gender role stereotypes, and anyone falling outside of those gender roles would be seen as weird, ill, mad, or even possessed by demons for a very long time. Women were routinely sectioned and tortured for being lesbian. Women who didn't want to marry could be sent to asylums.
Gay men could be tortured and killed. Women who didn't conform to gender role stereotypes could be burnt at the stake or sent by psychiatric treatment to make her more feminine and submissive to match the gender role she was pigeonholed into. There's a lot of crazy things that did happen back in the day. Um, However, that doesn't equate to today's time. Thankfully, all that is in the past, but it doesn't mean that people still don't enjoy their gender role, that people still don't enjoy, wearing dresses if you're a female or being masculine or alpha if you're a male. I mean, the things they did in the past was not obviously the right things to do, but you know, does that mean that we justify women's liberation movement or radical feminism mentality or hatred for men? Not all men are evil and not all women are sweet. So, you know,
The point of the critical discussion around gender roles was to argue that males and females could look, present, experience, and explore life in many different ways without it being a disorder or an abnormality or a condition or a problem. For example, a girl could be masculine presenting, interested in things that society had constructed as male or masculine, and it still doesn't mean she's a man or a boy. She's a girl who loves stuff and wants stuff and experiences stuff that the world had told her is man/boy stuff.
and that's okay. That's a tom girl, was it a tomboy, and that's fine, but not all transgender people fit that role. You know, we have a gender identity issue. It is a biological condition, and that's where you're misconstruing. So it means that just because you didn't feel like you were born in the wrong body doesn't mean that nobody else has had that issue. You're trying to box everybody in the same mentality, and that does not work. That's more recently, we have conflated biological sex with these gender roles. In academia, this started to happen in the 90s and 2000s in certain disciplines. Instead of talking about gender roles and gender stereotypes, we're led to believe that gender is actually an expression of innate identity or biological neurochemical reality, which it is. The science proves it now. It's like when you're a little kid, and like Marcy said, you know, she has her sexual preference as women, but she's also battled with her gender identity, and it's something that's innate. It's something that is hardwired. It's inside of you. Things don't always match between your identity and your sex.
It's as if no one can see how ultimately damaging this will be to society at large. Gender roles, now just shortened to gender, quote unquote, or extended to a, quote, gender identity, unquote, are a set of sexist, misogynistic, homophobic social norms that are placed in humans to make them fit, quote unquote, into pre-agreed binary categories.
Says the radical feminist who has hatred for men and who has her own mind made up and wants to push her views on everyone else. We have stopped talking about this definition of gender and instead been forced to accept a new definition of gender, a definition that many of us do not subscribe to. So don't change your gender. You don't have to subscribe to it. No one's forcing you to do anything.
Telling children and adults that they are born in the wrong body is abusive and biologically impossible. As someone who has worked with children and adults for over a decade, this narrative deeply worries me.
Well, you should probably change careers. I don't believe anyone can be born into the wrong body. Well, your prerogative, but it doesn't mean that it ain't so. And there is no scientific basis for this assertion, but there is. I note that no one has answered the question of where the right body went during the gestation process or where the wrong brain went as the baby developed inside of the female body. It didn't go anywhere.
You care to answer that?
Oh, of course I do. The brain doesn't go anywhere. The body doesn't go anywhere. If you follow the developmental process and you know exactly what that pathway is, if everything goes well, brain and genitalia match because there is a gender identity hardwiredness in that brain that allows you to know if you're a boy or a girl. If things go awry, which it does just by an amino acid not responding to the actual chemical reaction, the brain gets developed after the sexual organs are developed and it should match, but it doesn't. So it's not like it went anywhere. It's there. It's just being programmed differently from the set default system.
Hope that answered your question. The question that you say no one can answer. Would that be the $100,000 question?
I guess so. Do I get a prize?
It is biologically. Oh wait.
Where are we?
Where the wrong brain went?
Yeah.
What?
Okay. So it is biological. Yeah. No, it's right here. There is no such thing.
There is no such thing as a wrong body or brain. Well, that would be correct because, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, it's just
innately
get programmed correctly. It's kind of like when you do some sort of computer programming and like the fragmentation didn't go right, something happened and went awry. The same concept. This is why we have intersex people. Everything was supposed to be aligned, but things didn't work out the way that it did because of hiccups that takes place.
We can definitely feel dysphoric. Thank you for giving me the ability to feel dysphoric.
Yeah.
We can disassociate. We can become disconnected from our bodies, but we are never, and this is another absolutism.
Absolutism.
Yeah. Never physically made out of the wrong body parts or brain parts. We are whole. We might not fit into the binary, but we are all whole people. Our bodies are not wrong. Society is wrong.
And that's her opinion, and she's entitled to her opinion, but not all of us follow that opinion, and we think otherwise. This is why we end up doing what we're doing. We don't just do this out of a whim. Do you know how crazy it would do these things just out of a whim? Because, hey, it's fun to undergo a 7-hour procedure. It's fun to put chemicals in your body unless you actually feel that there's something wrong. It's fun to leave your family, your career, and everything just for some sort of, it's like, come on now, seriously. What I do believe is that humans exist on a massive spectrum, and society tries to fit them into feminine girls or masculine boys. Most of us actually sit somewhere in between. Society ain't doing anything. We choose to do what we do because we want to do it. Not because society wants anything, not because anyone's putting a gun over my head to do it. I did what I did because I chose to do it. It was of my own accord, my own free will. And I'm sure you did the same.
Absolutely. Until I was around 11 years old, I lived like a boy and looked like a boy.
Here's the kicker, right?
I had short hair. I played on the boys' football team. I only had boy mates. I refused anything pink, feminine, girly, or maternal. I loved my brother's toys. I never wanted to be a mom. I was mistaken for a boy for years. People used to think my mom had 2 sons.
Here's where the truth comes in. Obviously, this individual has been through a lot of the things that many of us have gone through. Some people can't fully transition. There's something that doesn't allow them. Like a lot of people that live on the down low that cannot, for their life of them, come out as gay for whatever reason. Because everyone has a different reason why they can't do what they do. But instead of like being accepting, they have to go against it because they couldn't do it. That means that nobody can. So people used to say to her in front of me, "Oh, boys will be boys," when me and my brother argued or played and fought. My little sister was the most feminine, maternal, girly, and cute little girl I knew.
There was no mistaking that. We were very different. She used to love playing with dolls and babies. I just didn't get it. I'd much prefer playing with my brother's cool toy that shot darts across the room.
I realized that I was attracted to girls by age 12, but thought it was a bit weird. Ignored it and never told anyone. I had boyfriends, and I think I did fancy them, but not in the way I fancied the girls.
I hated my body, and I hated my breasts. I used to slick all my hair back after a shower and wonder if it would be better if I was just born a boy. I used to wonder what my name could be if I was a boy.
I never told anyone about this. By 13, I was well into puberty and had 30F breasts I could do nothing about. I hated dresses and skirts. I didn't wear makeup, and I didn't care about learning to do hair or nails or anything, and still don't.
However, I definitely remember being sucked into performing femininity because of comments from boys and men in my life. Of course, blame others. I definitely remember starting to self sexualize and see myself as some sort of object slash entertainment for men and boys.
I found feminism at 21 and learned that it was completely okay for me not to conform to notion of femininity. She found the source that polluted her mind to change what she felt inside, and now a young adult very much influenced by this what's a militant type association that takes young girls who have one at one point transition and detransition because of the type of programming we're seeing from the radical feminist. It was the first time that I realized it was normal to be a woman, but not to conform.
I loved learning about the way gender role norms expect women to speak, look, act, walk, exist in a certain way, and suddenly lots of things started making sense to me. I realized that lots of the ways I felt about my body and myself were being pushed onto me by societal gender roles. This information was so liberating for me. Blame someone else. It's not my fault.
So let's see here. What do we got in the comments? Go back. I used to hate my okay. Yeah. So Marcy says I used to hate my last job and was a joke saying, "What did women fight for the right to work? I don't want to go to work." LOL. I know, right? I mean, and Darcy says,
if I had been born in the correct body to begin with, I wouldn't be transitioning. I was a man trapped in a woman's body.
There you go. And Dylan says, when I try to confide in my parents about my dysphoria, after they pressured me into it, they told me that pretending to be a guy won't help me accept my body or make my womanhood disappear. And I used to believe them too. And that is so cruel for our parents to like, instead of like listening to you and what's a word? Empathizing with you and giving you the autonomy and respect, they have to make you feel like you're crazy. If you do this, you're wrong. And, it's like, I just find that to be extremely wrong.
Dylan says, Darcy, exactly. I wish I didn't have to think about all that. I wish I could just be.
And you should be able to just be. And Marcy says they just don't understand, Dylan. They don't try to either. No,
no, because, for some people, especially the religious, the most important is their religion, is their faith in God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's all they care about. It doesn't matter what their sons or daughters are feeling, what they're going through. It doesn't matter at all. All that matters is what their agenda is at all costs, and that's just incorrect. And Marcia says, deja vu. Deja vu. Isn't that very similar to what people used to say about being homosexual? Exactly.
It's the same fighting lines that they use, right?
Exactly.
Marcy, they used to think that homosexual people were mentally ill, just like trans.
Exactly. Anything that goes against their norm has to be mentally ill. And Darcy says, Dylan, it's hard to deal with. I want phalloplasty because I get body dysphoria. I'm tired of using Packers. I'm tired of not being man enough to some women that I know. And it's really, really difficult, to really live life, in a world that we feel like we don't fit. We feel that we have to do things to try to make ourselves feel better. But society is fighting against us all the time. And that's just, it's heartbreaking, really.
Dylan, I've been dumped after having a relationship with a woman because I wasn't enough.
That is so sad. I'm so sorry about that, Darcy. And Marcy says she is explaining dysphoria. Wow, but she's anti-trans. I tell you, it's like they can't deal with the situation, so they have to push it out. And I know because when I detransitioned, that's exactly what I was doing. I was like feeding into the radical femme view, feeding into the religious view, because one wants to feel like one belongs, and you battle with yourself. And it seemed like they were battling, and that battle just makes them so pungent against the trans community, against gender in and of itself, because I can't be the way that I want to be, then gender doesn't exist. As I used to say, gender dysphoria isn't real. Why? Because I was battling. I was battling myself. I was like taking on a thought process that had been instilled there, as it was instilled with you, Dylan, and many of us, who grew up in a very religious household or a very judgmental household. We have to learn to fight against that and become true to ourselves.
So Dylan says, um, Darcy, I tried using a packer, but the completely synthetic feeling of it was too dysphoric for me. Also, I chickened out of wearing it in public, was afraid of getting called out.
I didn't like it. I don't wear a packer. I think it's the most disgusting thing ever. It sweats. I used to have the one that you could go to the bathroom and it it was just so messy. I don't worry about it. Nobody ever looks down there. I'm fine with what I have. I've made peace with myself. And, I know that at my age and even back in the day, I looked into it. It's not something that I would put myself through because I don't believe that anyone should have to hurt themselves to that degree to be who they are. And I'm not trying to judge those that feel they have to do it. More power to you. If you're able to do it, then good for you. I personally did what I needed to do to feel comfortable in my skin, and I feel very comfortable in my skin. So let's see. Darcy, honestly, it's rather just wait for something better than have to fiddle with something that slides around too much. I hear you. I hated it.
Mark, I heard about something about the Christian Lord said to the Christians, if they disguise their religion as love while expressing hate through God's name, that those ones will go to hell.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, yeah. I don't believe any of that bit. That's what I heard. Yeah, I don't believe it either. So Dylan says,
it seems as though this woman is internalizing her own dysphoria. Maybe she was actually trans.
I think so, and I'm sure that happens to a lot of people. And if they are recruited, because I'm going to use that word, by the radical femmes, then
Yeah. Well, listen. It says it wasn't until I was 27 that I started to question if I was gay. Although she felt that way at 12, but she said she wasn't.
Right.
But she was 12 and she was interested in girls.
Yeah.
I realized I was married to a man, but I wasn't attracted to him. And I really just didn't want to be around or with men.
Wow. So I started to dress more like how I wanted, stop trying to fit in, stop trying to conform, found rad femme and lesbian networks.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Most of my friends are lesbian women, butch women, and gender nonconforming women. I had never realized that I seemed to click much more with these women. They say you attract your clan. It seemed like I did.
Last year, I left my marriage to my husband and told my best friend I was in love with her. I have been openly lesbian for only about 9 months. Okay. In reality, it was much longer, decades longer.
So I've always noticed that those people that come out, and they've only been out for a little bit, they are the loudest. And she's a psychologist. These people are very dangerous to our community because they're the ones that collaborate with the religious extremists and other conservative groups, and of course other rad femmes, to try to make trans people's life a living hell. And that's very scary to me because that is what's happening this day and age. After all that we have accomplished, these individuals want to take those rights away because they are not comfortable with who they are. They pretend they are. They couldn't do it. They couldn't go through with it. But now everyone else is not trans. Gender does not exist, according to her.
I often think that if I was born a decade later, I would be one of those girls being told, and I could live as a boy and bind my breasts and take hormones and so on.
It's like totally making fun, making light of individuals who are very happy for transitioning, who their life is now totally complete. They're just, disregarding our existence. I disagree with the entire concept of telling children or adult that just because they don't conform to masculinity or femininity, or that they are gay or lesbian or gender nonconforming, they must be trans. They must be born in the wrong body.
Why can't they just be male or female?
happy to live that way, more power to you for being who we are. That's what kills me. It's like these individuals want to tell us how to live our lives,
Oh, I know.
you know, and they want to make it impossible for people to, you know, transition and do what they do. So let's see here.
One of the parts of this debate that makes the least sense is the concept of challenging binary notions of gender roles by transing between two notions of gender roles.
Surely the way to challenge the way society forces us into oppressive gender role stereotypes is to not conform to any of them.
So she says, as a psychologist, be the femme gay guy, be the butch lesbian, be the bisexual person who is completely ambiguous, be femme one day and butch the next. Be whoever, whatever you feel. Present how you like when you like. Be a het guy who likes makeup and dressing up. Be a het woman who hates all things feminine.
And that's fine too. That's what you want, but there are trans people with gender dysphoria. These are the ways, these are the ways to break the gender binary, transcend it, make gendering relevant. That's the thesis of radical feminism. Yeah, that's your thesis. Doesn't mean everybody's got to follow it. Smash the patriarchy, dismantle gender. You know, hating men and trying to tell people how to live their life is not going to make this world a better place. And for a psychologist, you've got a very dangerous view that could hurt a lot of people. You should not. You should be neutral when it comes to things like that. But you're not. You're putting your 2 cents in, more than 2 cents actually, and you can end up hurting someone.
These aren't just t-shirt slogans. They are fundamental aims of what? Radical feminism.
Yep.
However, we still have a gender binary, even where people claim it is a spectrum. It really isn't being talked about or perceived as a spectrum.
Why does a boy who doesn't conform to masculine ideals need to trans to a girl? Because that's what they do.
Some people need that.
Yeah. Why does a girl who hates femininity and feel more comfortable with masculine gender roles need to trans to be a boy? Because it is totally different to be a tomboy or a very feminine boy and want to just live your life somewhere in between or do whatever it is. But there are people, genuine people, that have gender dysphoria and want to transition. And because we can, we do so. It's our right. No one has the right to tell us how to live our lives.
Doesn't that just support the binary? Doesn't that just support the notion that you can either be masculine or feminine, but you can't exist between these categories?
No, that just means that people are different and they're going to take a different path than you, and that's okay. If you don't fit in one, you must be others is literally a binary. Society created gender roles of masculinity and femininity, and we force them on humans from birth. Not conforming to them doesn't make us trans, it makes us human. You may not be trans, although I think that you are, and kind of like really were unable to accept that part about you. But there are people that are trans, and there are people that will do what they need to do to make themselves feel happy. And there is the ability to do so. So who are you or anyone to tell us not to? I mean, it's like, just be you. Leave everybody else be. I don't get it.
I don't think there is anything wrong with girls or boys who don't feel their gender, quote unquote, which you seem to say doesn't exist. I think the world is wrong. I think they should be allowed to be who they are without us telling them they must be a boy in a girl's body or a girl in a boy's body. Why should we medicate and mutilate them for not conforming to gender norms who we have been trying to dismantle for decades?
And Darcy says, I don't like to have a flat crotch. Looks in some clothing. If I wear a packer, it feels like space. Edges looks better. Yeah, it's up to every individual. Like I said, it really doesn't bother me. I'm quite content, with what I have. I mean, not all men have bulges. There are men that are small like me, and it doesn't bulge out. So it's kind of like I would hate to be one of those guys that have this massive. I mean, it's like it's got to feel uncomfortable. It's like when they perform phalloplasty on some of the trans guys and they end up getting this huge size and it doesn't retract like the regular genital would. You have to walk around with this thing dangling. It's got to be so uncomfortable. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know? So, yeah, not every guy shows a bulge. You know, that's something that I learned throughout the years. And that's why I'm like, I'm okay because I just got what I got, you know? But I, you know, hey, more power to you, bro. If that's what you need, you know, you got to do what makes you feel good and makes you feel happy. So let's see, Marcy.
Marcy says, I don't like how I think the same, Dylan. She's explaining dysphoria. I went through the same growing up.
Yeah, but she doesn't know it, or she does, and she's in denial about it, and now wants to like torture everybody else with her frame of mind and way of thinking. And Dylan says, Darcy, I just try not to think about it or limit the times I have to deal with it. Sometimes I shower in the dark. I hate it.
Darcy says, Dylan, I know how you feel.
And Dylan says, that's what's nice sentiment, but if you try to suppress the existence of actual trans people, you will end up hurting those people, especially a psychologist that claims to be supportive and to want to help people. Yeah, she claims to be supportive. She claims she doesn't want to hurt people. You know, she puts those little disclaimer there, but she doesn't realize that she's basing her words on her own hatred of who she is and can't deal with it. So she's just going to like poop on everybody else, you know.
Darcy says, I've had a migraine all day. Ugh.
I wonder if something in your, maybe MSG or something, sometimes certain chemicals in food will create a migraine. Marcy says, why are people getting the idea kids are being forced to transition? I may be wrong, but I don't think that's the case. No one's forcing anyone to transition.
That's just more fear mongering.
Yeah, it's all part of the fear mongering. That's part of the campaign that they use. And Dylan says,
Marcy, some kids are by parents who are on the extreme left, but those cases are rare and few as it is.
Dylan, I mean, I don't really think any parent really forces their child to transition. I think that's a lot of the fear mongering, you know, people just trying to make stuff up. I think, you know, that would be caught right away from a therapist, you know, if they see that the kid is being forced to do something like that. I really don't want to believe something that a parent will force their child to transition. I mean, that's kind of like child oriented and that's part of the therapy. You know, it would just.
To get to that point where they would be in a session with a gender therapist, there must be insistent, persistent, and consistent, you know, activity on the part of the child.
Saber chicken, that would be ideal, you know, but when a person knows from the core, and a child is a person, people think children don't have a mind. They're like, they don't even like take children as if they were real people. They just think of them as a pet they feed, clothe, and send to school. When a child tells you they know something's wrong and their life is just debilitated by this, a parent that is a good parent will support their kid. You know, you're too worried and people like you about how you look in the face of others. So it's like you want to force your kid to be how you want them.
Or what your Bible tells you. Or what your Bible, believe.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's not cool. So
Mikhail Hunt says, may I give my own opinion? I will be polite.
Go right ahead, Michael. Opinions are always welcome.
You guys should get Mr. Atheist on here.
We watch him.
Have you seen his channel? His views are very much like ours. Yes, we do love the Mr. Atheist podcasts and his other shows that he does. It's quite really awesome. Quite amazing, just his perspective and stuff.
So we're going to go into a little bit of, here's an article from the New York Times. Anatomy does not determine gender, expert says. So defining gender as a condition determined strictly by a person's genitals is based on a notion that doctors and scientists abandoned long ago as oversimplified and often medically meaningless.
Researchers who have studied gender issues and provided healthcare to people who do not fit the typical M/F pigeonholes, said that the Trump administration's latest plan to define gender goes beyond the limits of scientific knowledge.
The idea that a person's sex is determined by their anatomy and birth is not true. And when we've known that it is not true for decades, said Dr. Joshua D. Safer, an endocrinologist and executive director of the Center of Transgender Medicine and Surgery in Mount Sinai Health System in New York. He's also the president of the United States Professional Association of Transgender Health.
But exactly what does determine gender identity? A person's powerful core knowledge of who they are is not so clear.
We know that there is a significant, durable biological underpinning to gender identity, Dr. Safer said. What we don't know are all of the biological factors at play that explains gender identity. As far as we in the mainstream biological medical community understand it in 2018, it is hardwired, it is biological. It is not entirely hormonal, and we do not have identified genes, so we cannot specifically say it is genetic.
Are genes a factor? Genetics does play a role, though. In studies of twins, if one is transgender, the other is far more likely to also be transgender, if they are identical rather than fraternal twins. Identical are near matches genetically, fraternal ones are not. The findings are similar for twins who have type 1 diabetes, which is known to have a strong genetic component.
So here we are. We know that there is some genetic etiology. We in the medical community are still learning and still growing and still trying to understand this phenomenon, but it is biological. And there is a genetic etiology behind it. So the Trump administration proposal outlined in a memo by the Health and Human Service Department would establish a legal definition of sex under Title IX, the federal civil rights law that bans gender discrimination in education programs that receive government financial assistance. The change would eliminate protections afforded transgender people under the Obama administration. And again, the right, the conservatives, are trying to remove everything that we have gained.
The agency's proposed definition would be determined by the genitals that a person is born with, according to a draft reviewed by the New York Times. Whatever is on the birth certificate defines gender, unless rebutted by reliable genetic evidence, according to the memo.
But what would constitute reliable evidence? It may be hard to find. We don't know genes for everything that we've identified medically, Dr. Saber said. We just don't have such sophisticated understanding of many medical processes, not even about sex.
How to define identity? Researchers say gender identity comes from the brain, not the body.
This is what I've been saying all along.
Some put it more bluntly, it originates between your ears, not between your legs. But the forces that acted on the brain to shape that identity are not understood, and physical or chemical differences in the brain that might relate to have not been well defined.
No one knows for sure why body and mind sometimes do not match. But being transgender is not a matter of choice, Dr. Saver said. It's not a fad or a whim. For transgender people, it is generally an overwhelming sense that their gender is not the one on their birth certificate. And gender is not about whom they're attracted to. It's about who they are.
Distress over the mind-body mismatch and can become especially intense around puberty. And the risk of suicide shoots up for young people in this situation. Mainstream medicine has begun to recognize how serious an issue it is. Last month, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued its first ever policy statement regarding care for transgender children and adolescents, and those who are quote unquote gender diverse or non-binary, meaning they are neither clearly male or female.
The pediatric statement urged a gender-affirming approach, which translates as respecting and supporting children, even young ones, in their self-expressed identity. But that other psychologist said not to, right? The society also noted that transgender young people have high rates of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, substance use, self-harm, and suicide.
Last year, the Endocrine Society, the professional group for experts in the glands and organs that produce hormones, issued guidelines for treating transgender people. They said gender identity was biologically based. And they urged federal and private insurers to cover medical needs related to it for transgender people.
We have made such stride, and these individuals want to take that away from us, but yet they claim they mean us no harm. It's not as simple as X and Y. Apart from the transgender issue, other conditions make it clear that defining male and female is not simple. For instance, there are people with XY chromosomes, which makes them genetically male, who look, act, and feel like a woman because their bodies cannot react to male hormones.
In other cases, some women with a condition that exposes them to high levels of testosterone before birth identify as male, but many more with the same condition do not.
Some of the most compelling evidence for the idea of gender identity being hardwired into the brain comes from medical reports on people who were born in the 50s, 60s with birth defects involving their genitals. Doctors thought the humane solution to spare such children from being ostracized was to perform surgery to make them one sex or the other.
Since it is easier for surgeons to make a vagina than a pea, most of these babies were made female. Their parents were advised to raise them as girls and never to tell them about their condition at birth. The general belief was that their upbringing, a triumph of nurture over nature, would make them truly female.
The idea was a failure. As they matured, many had a clear sense that they were male. According to a study of 16 of them, more than half wound up identifying as male.
Considering the fact that you can brainwash some people about just about anything, failing with so many is catastrophic, Dr. Safer said in an email.
Of all the information on gender identity, he said that to medical experts, the studies on those cases provide the strongest evidence that gender identity has deep biological roots. The proof is in the pudding. Let's see what. Let's see here.
So Mikhail was going to answer something.
Yeah, let's see here. I believe in you, and you. Wait, I believe in you are what you are when born. Anything else is a self-diagnosed that can't be accurate as the person has not lived as the other gender. Well, I hope that the article that we just finished reading kind of puts a little damper on that statement. You can believe that, and there are many people that want to believe that. Some people believe that because of the religious upbringing. Other people believe that, like the psychologist article that we read. But the true reality is that there is a biological ideology behind it. We don't make this stuff up. You can't tell someone with all sorts of intersexual conditions that they aren't what they feel they are. Because even though there might be women with an XY chromosome, chromosomally they are male. You know, we there's just so much, and the next article is going to touch upon the fact that intersexuality or transgender people do have an intersex condition. And let's finish reading here before we go to the next article. Dylan says,
"Oh, just about Mr. Atheist, right?"
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Mikhail, I understand a bit what you're saying, but it would be almost the same as people asking, how do we know we're gay if we haven't been on the opposite as sex yet? Because we know what we are and who we are. Hard to explain it, though, through text.
Exactly. You know, and the question was, how do you know if you've never been the other gender? Because gender is totally innate. It's hardwired in your brain. You don't need to have ever lived that other sex to know who you are. It's something within you. It's an innate feeling. It's a sense. It's like, you know, when you have a third sense about something, you actually know this within you. Let's see here. Okay.
Sable Chicken says, do you really want things like homosexual on your driver's license? So if that is not a gender, then what is?
That absolutely made zero sense. Why would you want?
Gender is not homosexuality.
Yeah, and I just finished.
Gender is
reading.
Homosexuality is a sexual preference, not a sexual
identity. You know, makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, Marcia said, wasn't saying that being gay is same as gender, was making an example. And Dylan says,
those cases where a twin can absorb its sibling in the womb and have two separate genomes can also be a way that one twin could end up trans, especially if they are fraternal and one twin is biological male.
That's why the doctor was explaining that it's identical versus fraternal. Um, Marcy says, like saying no one is born gay, but we are. How do we know if we haven't had intercourse yet? Because we know. Exactly. Exactly.
Some people are born with a male loving gene.
Yeah, exactly.
Others are born with a female loving
gene. And there is studies that have proven that. I think we talked about that in one of our past shows. And Surgo, okay, I'm not going to repeat that last name there or whatever, but I hate the argument that nobody is born gay because straight people compose 80 to 90% of the world. That is a biological innate sexuality to occur so much and so often. Being gay is innate. Exactly. Totally true.
It is. It's innate. That's what it is. I mean,
you could try to fight it, and a lot of people do because
you can repress it.
You can repress it, but that'll never go away. It'll always be there in your heart.
Why is there not much hate for trans men as there is for trans women? Because what we do is such socially a taboo, and it is like seen as the worst way that a male could go, right? And that is like, it's like lesbianism is like accepted for guys to see and to understand and
and the funny thing
allowed
is,
to exist in there.
The funny thing is there's a lot of men that are down low, and there's a lot of men that are closeted cross-dressers. That's a lot, but the whole concept, because the way we are raised or programmed to believe boys don't cry, boys aren't supposed to do this, that, and the other. There's a different standard for men than there is for women. So
double standard.
So when a female body human transitions to become a male body human, it's not something that's really talked about. Number one, we blend in. A lot of us become stealth, and guys really don't pick on trans guys, and I'm glad about that because it would be pretty brutal. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Boys Don't Cry, what they did to Brandon Tina, which was very horrible. Most trans guys don't know how to fight if their life depended on them, and that would be a pretty messed up situation. But yeah, you're right. You see a lot more hate towards trans women than you do towards trans men. And Penny, Penny joins us.
She says, "Howdy, good to see you. I will now be caring for Betty's 93-year-old sister. If you're ever in Bay Area, holler at me."
Sounds awesome. We left that area, right? Bay Area is
that's San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco. Okay, yeah. We passed kind of by there when we came from Portland down to Arizona. We're in Arizona now. Let's see. Darcy says, for the most part, people think trans men don't exist. I know, but we do.
Right.
We're everywhere. And
what was it in Portland at the Planet Fitness?
Oh, they're all trans guys. A bunch of trans guys.
It was like Trans Guys Central.
Yeah. Double standards. And let's see, what does...
It's always felt hardwired to me. I'm 50/50 bisexual. So agree also with Z.
Yeah. And Marcy also agrees with C.
Darcy says, yeah, that movie was really good.
Yeah, it was really... It's like one of the first movies I really ever pointed out, transgender males. So anyway, there's this... I guess it would be an article written by Milton Diamond from the Pacific Center for Sex and Society in the University of Hawaii, Manoa. Very interesting article, and it reads, in transsexual...
that's German.
That's German. Can't read that.
Translated.
I can't read German. Okay, let's try. So this paper attempts to demonstrate that there are significant natural inborn sex differences found between the brain of those called transsexual people and others. It does so by showing the differences are due to normal genetic, hormonal, environmental forces that lead eventually to differences in the transsexual person's brain.
This development brings with it feelings of dysphoria regarding one's gender identity. It is such feelings that lead to a desire for sex gender change. These brain differences are sufficient enough to conclude that persons with a transsexual condition are, drumroll,
Brrr.
intersex.
Let's repeat that again, just in case you all didn't hear it.
Intersex.
These
brain differences are sufficient enough to conclude that persons with a transsexual condition are intersexed. Simultaneously, it is recognized that many intersexed persons will switch from their assigned gender, yet many will not.
Transsexual people are persons now also commonly referred to as trans persons or trans persons. Those not transgender are commonly referred to as cisgender individuals. In an attempt to explain themselves, trans persons often say they are convinced that they were born in the wrong body. They believe they have the anatomy of one sex, but identify and the emotional awareness of the opposite sex.
It's all about feels for trans people. It's like as if feelings aren't connected to our biology.
Feelings are biological. There is chemical reaction in the nervous system in your brain as things are taking place that allow you to feel. It's biological. It's not some sort of like whimsy stuff, you know? So,
transsexual persons are so convinced of this feeling that they desire to forego any advantages they think associated with their birth sex and seek transition to their opposite sex. And many are willing to attain the goal of transfer, even at great expense financially, emotionally, and socially, as evidenced by divorce, separation from friends and family, and other such losses that I have experienced personally and continue to today. The question arises, how does this feeling come about? What causes it?
So before I go on, I want to like point this out again and what that other psychologist was reading. If you think this is like some sort of game for people, where people lose family, friends, jobs, their health to pursue this feeling is so strong that it's labeled gender dysphoria. Okay, this feeling is so strong that makes us do the things that we do so that we could feel better about ourselves. So to disqualify our feelings as just a matter of craziness is bizarre because it is an actual intersex condition. You may not want to agree with that if you're an intersex person yourself and all of a sudden you're feeling like you're being shafted because transsexual people are taking away what you feel is yours. We are all entitled to the understanding that there is something biological going on, that feelings are not just some woo-woo stuff, as many of you try to make it seem.
So we had a question, and we had, well, some comments here. Okay. It said, my ex-lesbian lover, says Penny, 1978-1982, is now Leon Mostovoy. Wow. He has fabulous pictures, photos, and more on his site.
Awesome. I wonder how that made you feel? I always like to, learn how people react to stuff like that. Dylan Cole says, Darcy, there is hate for trans men among other men, cis specifically, because they still think of trans men as women. They fail to understand that their trans man isn't just a lesbian, or that it is a fetish. And that's pretty sad when people think that. To think that people would do what we do fetish. Fetish is something you buy a pornographic movie, you watch it, you buy lingerie, but you don't go changing your entire life and losing social status for trans women, and trans guys. Okay, we gain social status, but we also lose friends, families, and we like. There's a lot that we go through. We just won't do this just out of a whim. It's bizarre.
So Sable Chicken has a nice question. So everyone who is homosexual are intersex?
Why do you keep comparing homosexuality with transsexuality? You really have
gender and sexual preference
are two different things. Okay, let me ask you this. How do you identify? Am I a homosexual? I was born genetically, cis as a cis or assigned female at birth. Okay. Am I a homosexual? I'm with a person who was assigned male at birth. Either way you cut this, we are heterosexuals. So how can you compare? I mean, there are trans people who are homosexual, who are attracted to their same sex, but there are people that aren't. So, you know, where do I mean? And again, we're going to continue reading this after we read the comments. But
Dude called Rowan joins us.
hey, dude called Ron, how are you?
Marcy said, Sable Chicken, you are way off. No
Totally.
one said that at all.
I know.
Sable Chicken has a way of doing it.
Yeah, I know. She likes to
Instigate.
instigate. That's the she can't help it. It's part of who she is, and but we don't ever kick her out. We welcome her comments, her questions, because we're all entitled to that. And Marcy says, okay, I already read that.
Sable Chicken, Marcy, how do we identify who is a man?
I think that's pretty evident. Just ask a person. Very simple. Ask a person, because the person is the only one that's able to really tell you that. It's like if somebody asked you over for dinner, are they going to read your mind and find out what it is that you like to, what you want to eat, or would they ask you, what would you like for us to cook for you, or what don't you eat, or something like that? Asking people, it's called communication, respect for one another as humans. And okay,
so when you see a man, it's a man.
It's like, what do you see here? What do you see there? What are we presenting as?
Sable Chicken, if someone identifies as a man and makes the effort to present as such, sometimes you just have to take their word for it, within reason, of course.
Okay, identifying is something that we don't get to do for ourselves. And whose land or world would that be?
In her world.
In your world, because in the world that we live in, people identify every day. Every single day, people identify as non-gendered, asexual. There's all sorts of identity, it's part of life. Penny says, so Leon was with me when he was 19 and 22. He started transitioning in his 40s. Wow. Yeah, I transitioned when I was 38. So yeah. Wow. That must have blown your mind probably, right?
Marcy says, I think you're mixing up being gay and being trans. One is gender identity. Yeah, that's what we said. And one is sexual preference.
Yeah, I think that is definitely what's going on there. And a dude called Rowan says, Sable Chicken, we don't choose to be trans. Exactly. It's just as the article that we're reading stated. You are the exception to the rule. Means by that,
it's all about sex. Even gender is about sex, she says.
Are you talking about a sexual act? That's just, it's not all about sex. There's a lot of transgender individuals who are asexual. They don't even engage in any sexuality. You're like trying to put everybody in one box, and it doesn't work that way. And Darcy says,
Marcy, what did you think of my transition photos the other day on their last stream? I also have more photos that they didn't show that was in their inbox.
And Penny says, the only thing that I really, really would get frustrated about is that he over feminized my past. One day was dressed like a Castro look tank top, etc.
Leon said something about that. I just laughed. I said, look, and he laughed. Oh, remember, I was Max Wolf Valerio's roommate, so I went through the fire with Max.
Wow. Interesting. So, where were we here?
The initial factor
okay.
in the development of transsexualism involves genetics. Theta and Young in 2002 reported finding a strong heritable component to the condition they call gender identity disorder, GID, symptomatology. With this, they implied that gender identity was much less a matter of choice and much more a natural matter of biology.
In 2013, a large study among trans persons found 1/3 of monozygotic identical male twins and approximately 1/4 female monozygotic twins were concordant in transitioning. Essentially, no dizygotic familial twins were concordant in transitioning. And in 2014, it was reported that concordance in transition had occurred even among a trans twin pair that were reared and lived apart. In some, these findings supported basic biological underpinning of the trans condition. Are we listening here? So the question that it was like about a choice, it is not a choice. This is biological through and through.
Another feature of transsexual development needs understanding. This too points to its natural biologic nature. It is known that the genitals and brain develop at different times. The genitals develop early prenatally during the first 6th through 12th week, and they may develop in masculine or feminine form.
If the genitals develop under the influence of the androgen testosterone, they are masculinized. If they are not, female genitals develop. In comparison, the brain, it is believed, develops during the later part or period of pregnancy and also in subjects to the influence of androgen.
If there is significant androgen present at the time, there will be brain masculinization. If not, there will be brain feminization. If it thus is clear that the brain and genitals can develop independently and under different forces.
As Reiner has said, the etiology of gender identity may be neither obvious nor easily conceptualized. Yet, what is obvious is that the presence of androgen is critical. It is a determining factor in the development of behavioral dimorphism in humans, genital structure, male typical behaviors, masculinization of the brain.
Thus, transsexuality could develop with the genitals indicating one sex, while the brain indicates the other. In cases of ambiguous genitalia, the degree of masculinization of the brains may differ from that of the genitals. A strict dichotomy between male and female may not occur. The shift between the sexes/genders may be partial, and the individual left with feeling somewhat both female and male. This same individual might also feel female or male under different circumstances or at different times.
It is appropriate to state some generally accepted definitions. In general, male and female maintain their usual meanings. A male has within the nucleus of each of his cell 22 pairs of thread-like structures called chromosomes. These particular chromosomes are called autosomes in recognition of a common appearance.
The male also possesses a 23rd pair of chromosomes distinguished as sex chromosomes. These consist of a relatively uniform X appearing chromosome and a much smaller Y. The typical male also has 2 testicles, a penis, prostate, and other usual features of male reproductive anatomy.
A female, in contrast, has within her cell 22 pairs of autosomes and 23 pairs of sex chromosomes and with 2 X chromosomes. The typical female also has a vagina, 2 ovaries, a clitoris, uterus, oviduct, and other features of female reproductive anatomy.
Intersex persons have in the same body both male and female biological characteristics that are typically found only separately in each sex. Often a person's sex is determined by a reference to that person's chromosomal status, with XY indicating male and XY indicating female. However, intersex features with their many conditions often confound this.
So those with transsexual characteristics are defined and classified in different ways. Basically, they are those individuals who aspire to change their sex from male to female or female to male, and all want to be so accepted in the gender they select, going from man to woman or woman to man.
Typically, such persons are said to be dysphoric in regard to their gender, a condition that used to be known as gender identity disorder, but it is currently known as gender dysphoria. This gender dysphoria refers to the impression that trans persons have that they live with a disturbing and troubling feeling of living in the wrong body.
Despite being assigned male at birth because of their male genitalia, they think they are female and should live socially as girls or women. If they were assigned female at birth because of their female genitalia, they think they should have been male and socially live as boys or men.
Inherently, they believe the easiest way for them to solve their dilemma is to change their sexual characteristics. While it is obvious, in general, males can live socially as girls or women, and females can live socially as boys or men. This is not without a heavy cost. Many think it is easier and more appropriate to have what has been called SRS, which they prefer to consider male genital conformation surgery or genital reconstruction surgery. Such surgery had historically been in many countries a requirement for legal sex/gender change recognition. Such restrictions are increasingly being removed in many jurisdictions.
Those who did change from male to female were commonly diagnosed as MTF. Those who switched female to male were diagnosed FTM. As a group, they had historically been identified as having Harry Benjamin syndrome, named after a physician that first popularized the condition. They were considered a woman born transsexual or men born transsexual. Today, the term has been simplified so that the common term used are trans women or trans men. Do we have?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Okay, where are we? Let's see. You had exemption to the rule.
So that.
Let's see.
So, are the terms male or female a sex or a gender?
The term male or female could be used either or interchangeably. I mean,
Dylan says sable chicken sex. Terms like man and woman are gender identity. They are different, but often squished together and thought to be interchangeable, but they are not. And Marcy says gender.
Gender and then
male and female.
I would say to me, somebody tells me
biologic category.
Yeah, male or so. Yeah, because to me it's interchangeable, in my opinion. I mean, I know that there's people that use stuff interchange or think one thing is a certain way.
We've seen sable chicken, and some people are saying, "Oh, they're a troll" and stuff. Well, they do like to instigate.
Yeah, they do.
But they're welcome here.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, she's just trolling. It's sad. I thought maybe someone was actually trying to understand how people feel. No,
she's a Christian.
Yeah, she is a Christian.
She believes in,
and I think she's got
gender binary.
If I'm not mistaken, remembering back, she's got a trans child of sorts. If I'm not mistaken. That's her interest in this whole thing. Yeah. So where were we here?
In 2006, a consortium of physicians met to consider the evaluation and treatment of the many intersex varieties in different associated nomenclatures, such as hermaphrodite and pseudo-hermaphrodite. They agreed to designate intersex conditions as disorders of sex development.
While there are many varieties of intersex conditions, two basic types are considered. The first type, usually recognized as ambiguous at birth, is due to the infant showing no clear distinction between male and female, boy and girl. A second type of individual has typical looking genitals, but has internal intersex features that are not apparent. These are occult intersex conditions. A person with an occult condition might, for instance, be born with both one ovary and one testy, or a gonad with combined ovarian and testicular features.
One common genetic intersex condition where the syndrome is not recognized at birth is the so-called Klinefelter syndrome. Such persons have 23 pairs of typical autosomes with an additional set of chromosomes, sex chromosomes, consisting of 2 or more X chromosomes and 1 or more Y chromosome.
It is the complement of sex chromosomes that are unusual in having a variant number of X's or Y's. Example, XXY, XXXXYY, XXY, etc. The most common form is known as 47XXY. This condition is not usually recognized at birth because at the time the genitals look acceptably male, and that is why In this way, the child is generally raised.
This can lead to problems, however, because persons with KS, Klinefelter syndrome, occasionally come to live as women. Another common intersex situation occurs when a person has both prominent breasts, develop what?
Prominent breast simultaneously.
Simultaneously with male XY chromosomes, hidden testes, and a vagina. This is the complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, CAIS. This condition also is usually not recognized at birth because the persons look like a typical female infant to be raised as a girl.
The most common intersex variety is called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. These individuals have XXX chromosome, ovaries, and a hypertrophied clitoris that looks like a small penis. This condition is natural result of an adrenal problem that results in excess androgen production and subsequent masculinization both of the body and behavior.
Less common are conditions in which persons appear to be female at birth and are raised as girls, but after puberty develop as males. These are conditions where the person congenitally lacks crucial testosterone modifying enzymes but produces them at puberty. And when these enzymes come available, they convert testosterone to the androgen dihydrotestosterone needed to masculinize the genitals. These conditions are distinguished in name by the deficiency of the enzyme involved, either 5-alpha reductase or 7-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase.
So the 5-alpha condition is known to be prevalent in the Dominican Republic, and the 17-beta condition relatively common among Arab population in the Middle East. As genetic conditions, they persist in a group that intermarry.
Even less common are mosaic situations in which the same individual possesses both XX and XY cell types. Such a person might have an arm considered male because its cells are all XY, while the same person's leg might be considered female because its cells are all XX.
So the intersex condition might manifest by differences in several of these organs or function simultaneously. Example, by differences in the nature of the chromosome, gonads, genitals, or elsewhere. Since most intersex phenomena are occult, meaning hidden, the majority of individuals with such are often unaware of their condition. For trans persons, it is the brain that is intersex in a non-apparent way.
How has the intersexuality of the transsexual brain been revealed? Early findings of sex differences were reported in the rat brain by Gorski et al. In 1978. They termed this area with the sex difference the medial preoptic nucleus. This was followed by some years later by an analogous report for the human brain that the anterior commissure and massa intermedia were found sexually different. The search for sex differences in the brain became an active topic for research.
So neo-anatomical sex differences were observed in the mid-sagittal area, both in the anterior commissure and the massa intermedia in humans. This analysis was from the post-mortem tissue from 100 age-matched adults, male and females. While not present in all individuals, when present, the anterior commissure was in the average of 12% larger in females than in males, and the massa intermedia was an average of 53% larger in females than in males. These sex differences were found even though the brain of males were larger than those of females. Previously, these investigators had also found differences in the shape of the splenium, more bulbous, of the corpus callosum, but not in the area covered.
The same laboratory team identified other sexually dimorphic cell groups in the preoptic area of the human hypothalamus and collectively termed them the interstitial nucleus of the hypothalamus, with 4 subregions named INAH 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of these, the volume of INH3 was found almost 3 times as large as in men as in women and contained more than twice as many cells.
Between the ages of 10 and 93 years, the nucleus decreases greatly in volume and in cell numbers. It had been suggested that this region was related to sexual orientation. It is located within the area located within an area that is essential for gonadotropin release and sexual behavior in mammals. Another cell group, INAH2, was twice as large in the male brain, but also appeared to be related in women to circulating steroid hormone levels.
Since the preoptic anterior hypothalamic area influences gonadotropin secretion, maternal behavior, and sexual behavior in several mammalian species. These results suggest that functional sex differences in the hypothalamus are related to significant sex differences in neural structure.
As with the Allen et al. 1989 findings, Hoffman and Schwab also researched the comparable area in the human. They reported that sexually dimorphic nucleus of the preoptic anterior region of the hypothalamus, SDNPOA, in the human was markedly sexually dimorphic in volume, number of cells contained, and in the structural organization. They reported finding that the volume of putative homologue of the area originally reported for the rat brain by Gorski et al. As sexually dimorphic was also sexually dimorphic in the adult human hypothalamus.
It was more than twice as large in men as in women and contained about twice as many cells. Among the most significant brain differences found were those of Zhao and colleagues. They reported finding that in males, the central division of the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, the BSTC, was significantly larger than in females.
Now consider neuroanatomical features found in the brain of transsexual people. In 1995, Zhuo et al. Were the first to report finding a female brain structure in genetically male trans persons. They hypothesized these findings supported the theory that gender identity develops as a result of a normal interaction between the development brain and sex hormones.
The area implicated was the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, the BSTC of the hypothalamus, that is sexually dimorphic in size and number of cells to that of the females contained. Krusever et al. Subsequently expanded upon this finding. They found the number of neurons in the BSTC of trans women was similar to that of the females among cisgender women. In contrast, the neuron number of a FTM transsexual was found to be in the male range.
This work supports the paradigm that for transsexual persons, sexual differentiation of the brain and genitals may go into opposite direction and point to a neurobiological basis of transsexualism and the accompanying gender dysphoria. Subsequent studies continue to substantiate these findings. Garcia, Falgueras, and Schwab in 2008, using 3 different staining techniques, reported finding the INAH3 volume and number of neurons in the brains of those who went male to female trans women is similar to that of the control females.
They proposed that the sex reversal of the INAH3 in trans persons is at least partly a marker of an early atypical and sexual differentiation of the brain, and that the changes in INAH3 and the BSTC may belong to a complex network that may structurally and functionally be related to gender identity.
Others continue this line of research. Bay, AO, and Schwab reviewed all sorts of potential influence on the sexual behavior of a developing child and found little evidence that exhibited sex differences were due for rearing. Others did find, however, in regard to play behaviors and personality characteristics, a strong influence of prenatal androgen.
Work from other groups also found significant sex differences relative to trans persons that follow the proposal that a testosterone surge masculinizes the fetal brain, and the absence of such a surge results in a feminine one. Gajewski et al., using fMRI, tested the cerebral activation patterns of trans women during their viewing of erotic film clips. The responses of these trans persons were more like cis female than cis male controls.
Simons et al., using a neural imaging technique called voxel-based morphometry, measure brain components from both trans women and trans men. This VBM is a procedure using statistical methods of analyzing that allows one area to be compared with another. They found many brain areas in which the gray matter structure differed from that of controls. Example, the cerebellum, the left angular gyrus, and the left anterior parietal lobe.
They concluded that structural brain differences exist between the brains of trans persons with control subjects dependent upon the gender expressed by the trans persons. The comparison agreed more with the gender expressed contemporarily than the genitals present at birth.
So, transsexual people are found to have sex differences in the corpus callosum, the largest white tract of the brain. While measure of this structure have over the years been controversial, these current authors using Fourier descriptors of colossal contours reported finding the value of the measure for those who have gender dysphoria more strongly reflected their mental sex of gender than their genital sex. So, I mean, and this goes on and well, something I guess. And then
Giuseppina, what? What? Yeah.
Then the gender, and then the associated biological sex. And they've already.
I don't know. Yeah.
Let's go here. Thickness.
Thickness in the cortex of the brain of trans persons has also been found significantly different. Zubiar Elorza et al. Showed that trans men showed a subcortical brain masculinization, while the brains of trans women showed feminization, particularly in regions of the right hemisphere. Luders et al. In 2012 also found regions of cortical thickness that differed in the brains of transsexual persons.
The results revealed thicker corticals in the brain of trans women, both within regions of the left hemisphere. And in the right hemisphere, they found the precuneus, fusiforms, lingual, and orbital frontal gyrus. These findings provide further evidence that the brain anatomy is associated with gender identity, where measures in trans women appear to be shifted away from gender congruent men.
One last comment here is appropriate. Very recent research has reported that the kisspeptin, a peptide crucial to reproduction by stimulating GnRH, has been shown to exhibit sex reversal in persons who transition from male to female. This was considered to possibly reflect, at least partially, an atypical brain sexual differentiation associated with transsexualism.
So, supporting these findings are many other reported documents documenting human male-female sex differences that show the brain of trans persons are more in keeping with their gender than their sex. It has been found, for instance, that male to female show sex atypical hypothalamus activation when smelling odorous steroids. Their sense of smell is more in keeping with their gender expression than their birth sex assigned.
Tests of hearing also reveal significant differences. Tests of dichotic listening, the ability to distinguish similar but different words, example, tick and talk, when simultaneously presented to each ear, have also revealed actual brain hardwired differences among trans women when compared with typical males.
In regard to hearing, their dichotic performances is more in keeping with their female gender than with their male sex. And Burke et al. Have reported finding differences in response to click-evoked audioacoustic emissions. These are sounds experienced within the inner ear after an initial stimulus click is presented. Trans girls, those males with gender dysphoria, were found to have more female typical responses than boy typical responses. And these differences were even found in neonates. And looking at all these things, that initial article that we read, that the woman didn't believe in gender and the stereotypes, as I mentioned before, we are biological, and there are certain stereotypes that are ingrained in our biology, even as much as the hearing, the taste, the smell, the look. I mean, it's there.
It's all there.
It's all there. These people that are negating the reality and truth and trying to make us feel like we're crazy. No, you're the crazy ones. We are not.
Before leaving this topic of brain differences, it is pertinent to remark that a difference between the brain functioning of adults and that of young children has been noted. Reiner, for example, who has a great deal of experience with both transsexual and intersex children, has commented that, quote, my own clinical experience would have to be interpreted as implying strongly that the brain states of the children or of the adolescents when they become adolescents quite different than the brain states of the adults.
Significant dental differences have even been found that it differentiates trans persons. Tosewski et al. Found that metric features of teeth from trans men have a intermediate pattern between cisgender men and women.
While more conclusive experimental data in support of the thesis presented is desirable, recent publications have appeared that amplify and review much of the material discussed above. A paper entitled Evidence Supporting the Biologic Nature of Gender Identity, and Bevan's book with the title The Psychobiology of Transsexualism and Transgenderism, 2015. To this investigator, there seems evidence enough to consider trans persons as individuals, intersex in their brains, and scant evidence to think that their gender transition is a simple and unwarranted social choice.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and link this for you guys. I'll also end up putting in the description area for those who want to actually read it. So that's why I've always said and will continue to say transsexuality is an intersex condition. And more will be known about this as time progresses. Of course, there are people that do not want you to know this, that will continue to push their biology of what they want biology to be, with the sex organs and chromosomes, but there's more to biology than meets the eye. And gender dysphoria is a biological condition. And we are the sex that we say we are, bottom line.
So I guess Sable Chicken feels a little beat up on in our group. She goes, what was it? She says,
let me go back here.
What was it? She said something like, they said, Darcy said, did Sable Chicken say he was a she? A cow, haha. Sable Chicken said, Darcy, I don't know, but I think this chicken is a little unstable. And she says, I would love to identify as a beautiful wild stallion, but seriously, now you guys are making up your own cultist language. That is why it's so hard to talk to you at all.
And she goes, trans and intersex are not interchangeable. I just finished reading you an entire article that proves it, and you're still arguing. The link is down below. Read it for yourself.
Darcy says, Chicken, I have a male brain, and I'm aware that my body will always be female. Sable Chicken says, Dylan, intersex is a term for the conditions where people's genitals are physically not male or female looking. Trans people differ because we were born a certain sex, but our brains develop patterns of the other sex. Trans people can also be intersex. Sometimes it might be why someone ends up being trans.
We just finished reading the entire article.
Sable says, I just got schooled by Mark as if the word sex only meant intercourse. And Lynn, it's Lynna, then says one sex or the other. So that was a little cultish. We schooled you?
We schooled you and then called
really?
you. Yeah.
We schooled you. A little extreme.
Yeah. So, Chicken, next time bring cow to help you articulate your thoughts. And a dude called Rowan says, Dylan, well, you can be intersex and trans because it would still mean you identify with a different gender that you were assigned at birth. Yeah, but the whole concept of what we're trying to convey here is that, according to the science, that the brain is a biological organ that houses your gender identity. And there are times when your gender identity obviously does not match with your biological sex, and that is considered, according to the new studies and stuff, an intersex condition.
I don't understand, honestly, when a body part like an arm can be XX and a leg can be XY.
Yeah.
Why this is so
difficult,
unbelievably difficult to ascertain that possibly the brain in utero develops differently from the genitals. Birthing is a complicated process. Development of a human fetus is a very complicated process, and it takes 9 months to complete, obviously, and it's still not done when the baby's born. But for you guys to say, those of you who think that gender and sex and gender identity isn't real and all that, and that there's no biological component to it, for you to say that, it just negates the fact that you don't believe that the biologic structure of the brain exists.
Right. And like the brain is just some piece of gray matter stuck there and has absolutely that it's all about your genitals and chromosomes. And like I said, the article is very self-explanatory. The link is down below, and I will put it in the description area when the show is over, which will be very soon because we've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes. And my voice is starting to crackle here a bit. Marcia says, yes, we are a trans intersex cult with our own language. Would you like to join? Then you will understand our cult code words. Seriously, the degrading bad energy isn't called for.
That's what Sable Chicken does really well a lot of times.
But hey, we don't kick her out. Like many people claim that we banned everybody that doesn't agree with us, which is not true. Marcy, thanks. Don't get that lot. I'm not the articulate online.
Sable Chicken says, I have a real issue that this idea that transgenders are actually all intersex. There are real tests for intersex. Not so with transgender. Again.
Read the article. It's on the link below.
We just read an article describing that there are occult versions of DSDs that exist. Disorders of sex development that apply to the brain. So it is not hard to conceive the fact that transgender people can have these intersex conditions. Why is that so difficult to comprehend? I don't get it. We just did an article. There is scientific basis. The BSTC region, all these different things that are going on in the brain that are more complicated for the layperson to understand, and you just want to discount it by saying, oh no, it doesn't exist. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Darcy said he stopped taking tea for a week and now his butt's growing. 1 week?
No one said all transgender people are intersex, but some are. What is the issue? Yeah, I know. It's always this all or nothing, Marcy, with these people.
And that, very clearly, the article, transsexualism as an intersex condition. It is clearly stating that.
We just read it.
Yeah,
we just read it. It's like a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's like,
the article's right here. Article's right there. Click it right above your taking hormones and cutting out genitalia because you think you have something that has no physical text. Just finish reading. Do you listen? Do you have the capacity to listen and not place your own opinion and your own thought process? Listen with an open mind. Professionals, scientists, researchers have put together this paper that we just so gracefully read to you, and I have laryngitis from reading so much, yet you continue to crackle away.
Like a chicken.
Like a chicken.
Cluck, cluck,
cluck, cluck. Yeah.
Dylan says, when I was first diagnosed and my parents and I learned this, they took it as if it caused me to stray from reality instead of causing a lesser known sexual condition.
I think your parents are pretty much like Sable Chicken, probably, Dylan. Same religious upbringing. Because let it be known, Sable Chicken is a Christian.
What is the issue, Marcy says to Sable Chicken? Trans people exist whether you agree or not. So what is the argument? Darcy, they have no intentions of understanding. They are here to be inflammatory.
Who's they contradict themselves all the time? Who is they? If you're speaking about us, we, as we grow and we learn, our views change. It's called being human. I don't think they.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like now, Sable Chicken, you're just here to be an agitator.
Yeah. And if we start continuing to feel that you're throwing off the chemistry here in this beautiful chat room, you will be barred and blocked. So, your choice. And Darcy says, chicken, then you should make a video of them saying one thing, then saying the opposite.
Oh God, please don't encourage people.
Don't encourage people to do that.
Mark, could just be weight gain from stopping tea or the estrogen returning. I don't know, but it
doesn't happen.
What I noticed, just give me my body cleanse.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that quickly though, because tea doesn't get out of your body. It takes a good 20-something days, sometimes even a little bit longer for the tea to fully go. And if you still have your female ovaries, maybe there's a little bit of something, but it takes a little longer than a week. Maybe you just ate a little too much this week or something. I don't know.
Exactly, Sable Chicken. What does it matter? We are all people.
Yeah, so, just let people be people and do what they need to do to make themselves happy and healthy. Marcia says she dropped her phone.
Clack, clack, clack.
All right, guys, we got to go. It's been 2 hours and 25 minutes. On Tuesday, we're going to be talking about testosterone, going really deep into the misconceptions and the stuff like that. And then, Marcy, let us know when you're ready. Going to be next Tuesday. We're going to do it before next Tuesday. Looking forward to interviewing you. And for those of you who watched, are not subscribed, please do so. Hit that subscribe button, the notification button, so you get notified when we have a show. Sometimes we have it at 6, sometimes we have it at 7. So the notification is your best bet. Support our show either through a Patreon or through the instructions on the description, which is through Google Pay. We appreciate all of you and your insights and your comments. Thank you so much. And Darcy says he'll email you guys at some point tomorrow to set up a date. Sounds awesome. Looking forward to it. All right, guys, be well. Remember that we love you, but remember to always love yourselves too. Have a good one. Good night.